peoples, what's up? My name is Jason and I'm from the Shelf Stories YouTube channel. And today I'm in the Dice Tower to review Destinies. This is from Lucky Duck Games. It is for 1 to 3 players competitive with a solo mode, 2 solo modes as a matter of fact. I'll talk about that in just a second. It is a storybook adventure. It is derives its gaming kind of DNA from RPGs and choose your own adventure style games. It has tiles, it has miniatures that you move around, but it also has very, very heavy app integration. The app generates characters, it divulges plots, it shows the different paths that you can follow as your character tries to fulfill their individual destiny. I put this game in my Games for a Healthy Mind series. It is where I highlight specific games that I think are beneficial to an aspect of our mental health. And in this review, I'm going to talk about the psychological concept of flow. I will get to all that, but first, let me go ahead and get to the table, show you how it plays, and then I'll tell you what I think. So without further ado, let's go to the videotape. So this is Destinies. Before I get into the walkthrough, I'd like to show you the componentry. So it will lift up the box right over here. It's not exactly a big box. This is a really, really super slick insert. You have this piece of plastic that holds everything together. You have some really nice little notched player boards. Take heed, Terraforming Mars. Notch your player boards. And don't make me get a deluxe edition to get those notched player boards. You have these miniatures, and when I say miniatures, I mean look at this. Look at these things. These are really super tiny. I don't know if I love that. I'll say more about that when I get to the analysis. But for the most part, if you're playing either a character or one of the NPCs, or at least putting them out, you're gonna be looking at these things. But then you have your gnarly enemies, and every single adventure, at least the ones that I have, seem to end with one of these big baddies. So creates that sense of anticipation that you have something to look forward to at the end of whatever story arc in which you're engaging. And then you have another nice little piece for your cards and tokens and such. All right, so the first thing you're going to do is you're going to set up your character. As you can see here, the app tells you exactly what you need in order to set them up. You need their main card, and every scenario has 3 different options for heroes or villains, or I don't know, characters. The game's pretty ambiguous when it comes to its morality sometimes. But I've chosen the Huntsman. And the app tells me exactly what to get for the Huntsman. I would get a coin for later use. I would get some dice and a starting item, and also it would lay out my skills. So I'm going to go over skills in just a second, but the important thing to note is the character has their destiny on the back. So I'm going to cover that up, but there are 2 different possible paths, not necessarily good or evil, just paths to follow depending on your inclination, where the momentum of the story is going to take you. And that will guide your decision making. That is secret. It's the only thing that's secret. You don't reveal that to the other players. Everything else gets revealed over the app, but at least you have that little bit of secret information. You're going to get items during the game. There are 5 slots for items. Once you fill up those 5 slots, then you have to start to churn a little bit. Some of the items are always on, but some of them are discard items. So you want to make sure to, if you're overflowing on items, especially if you have a very important check or something, you want to use those discards as much as possible. So here is the World of Destiny, at least the first module that the app told me to lay out. So as you can see from the picture right there, it told me to lay out a 1 tile face up, which indicates explored. And that is where my little hunter goes right there, emphasis on little. And also 4 unexplored tiles, which will go face down. All tiles will come from the central pile. As you can see, there's always has a vivid side and a obscured side, indicating explored and unexplored. So the core turn is actually fairly simple, at least when it comes to the map phase. You're gonna move or not move. You have an option to move, and then you're going to interact with something. So then, let's say my hunter is here and wants to explore somewhere along the way. I can explore up to 2 squares. Right now, I only have 1 square movement available to me, but eventually I'll be able to move 2. But let's say I wanted to just go 1 square down and discover 25. Check out what the app tells me to do. So I would uncover this. I would introduce 2 different map tiles right there. as you can see, I'm introducing 4 and 42. You see that the trees kind of meld in, the world is very cohesive, and I would get a point of interest. That basically occurs every single time. Sometimes there are multiple points of interest, but in this case, there's only one, and then I would choose to interact with that. I kind of have no choice in this case, but like I said, there'll be more choices later. But let's say I didn't want to do that. Let's rewind that a little bit, and let's say I wanted to talk to the cleric instead. This is also functions as its own point of interest, and I rewind that a little bit, and I decide I want to talk to the cleric. A screen will come up that looks just like that. So then a couple of options are there. First of all, you can interact. That's what the ellipsis is talking about. You press it, and you do what the app says. Just kind of moving the story along. Sometimes you have something to scan, and that's the QR code, and there are 2 general types of things that will come up in terms of scanning. One of those possibilities to scan is going to be off of the QR code. Various people on the land are going to have indications of what is the character's destiny, kind of clues as to where to go next. And so the character would choose which path they wanted to proceed on. I'm going to keep this a little bit secret so that no spoilers and all that kind of thing. But you know where you're going, and so you can choose which path that you're going for, especially if you're kind of progressed down a certain destiny path. You're going to want to ask people about where the next thing is in order to figure out where you're going. So that's how the game kind of gives you a little bit of direction. It isn't purely open world. Especially if playing in competitive mode, you're going to want to get to places before your rivals. Speaking of the item over here, you're going to notice that there's a QR code. That is really so much of where the adventure comes from, because you're going to get a lot of items, and the game kind of leaves it open-ended in terms of when you can use the item. So like with the Destiny, certain characters, certain scenarios will invite you to use the items depending on what you're trying to do. So like if you're entering an archery contest, you're going to go ahead and use the bow, and that happen. If you go into a bakery and they ask you to taste some cookies, you can try to scan the bow. That won't get you very far. Sometimes the app might have some kind of humorous response if you try to do like a weird thing. But the heart of the game is figuring out which items go with which scenario, and to be able to get the results that you want. All right, so now we're back at the character to demonstrate a skill. I have decided to steal money from the church plate, something that I, Jason Perez, would never do, but my huntsman, why not? I did the min-maxy thing, a character thing of like, okay, I have a good skill in that, so I might as well do it. Okay, so you can see the skills are numbered from 1 to 12, and that corresponds to the main dice. You're going to be rolling these every single time. And this basically indicates how many successes you get. So then I would just roll these basic dice. I would get a 4 against this, and it would indicate 1 success because I reached that way. If I had rolled a 2, that would be no successes. But if I had rolled a 7, that would be 2 successes. In order to get a little bit further up the track, I would need to spend some effort dice. At the beginning of each round, you get 1 refreshed, and then different adventurers are going to either exhaust them or refresh them so you get more. So then sometimes you could decide to add this to the roll. So it has some numbers on it. You could roll that, and then that'll be a little bit of a bonus. It would also give you the opportunity to get this kind of explosion symbol, which in this case, it means automatic success. So if I had rolled that would be a 7 and then another success. So 2, 1 success, 3 successes. The app generally goes up to 6 successes. That just exceeds everything. So the part of the management of the game, and I think this is where the most of the gaminess comes out, besides figuring out what to do, is figuring out which checks should just get your regular dice and which checks should you save up for and start to roll all your dice. That will emerge from how perceptive you are and how immersed you are in terms of the narrative choices that are given to you. The end game will trigger when you have fulfilled that destiny. It will be very clear when you have fulfilled the destiny, and then it will tell you to go to a place. And when you go to a place, you will trigger that ending scenario. And it could be a lot of things. It could be a big boss fight. It could be a a ritual, it could be a race, it could be, or some kind of world-shattering event that's happening. And you have to kind of do a bunch of skill checks and run. There's so many different open-ended ways that this adventure can end. Usually, it will involve some kind of cluster of skill checks or having items. So it's worth exploring the game in a pretty open-ended way so that you're as prepared as possible. If you rush the ending, you might win, but then another player might take their time, be more prepared, so that when they trigger their destiny, they're able to move through it. And the person who finishes their destiny first is the winner of Destinies. So that was Destinies at the table. And as I said, I'm going to focus on a very specific thing. I'm a psychotherapist, so I'm very attuned to when a game has benefits for someone's mental health. This review is going to be as a companion to, I haven't seen a view from the Dice Tower. I'm sure that the boys, not sure who exactly is involved in that review, but they'll tell you about mechanisms and experience and all the different stuff about that. Absolutely, go ahead and watch that video. I'm looking forward to watching it myself. I want to highlight a specific instance here that I experienced when I was playing this game. I called it flow. Flow is a concept from a psychologist. His name is Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. I am going to post that. The spelling of that, believe me, I have practiced that pronunciation of that name for a long time. Hopefully I got it mostly right. So the idea of flow is we're immersed in a thing. We are so immersed in a thing that like everything else disappears. It becomes about that thing. Athletes, they call it in the zone. Like they're just in the game, like a basketball player. It's just them in the hoop, them and their defender. Nothing else matters. Artists and musicians and anybody who creates and crafts, they talk about, getting in that flow state and being so immersed in the thing that time disappears. Hunger disappears. They forget everything that usually kind of invades in our mind. So we spend lots of days outside of flow. Like we spend lots of days thinking about a billion things, picking up the kids and what's my laundry, and I'm worried about this, I'm worried about my job, worried about my family, and even dumb things like, okay, when is The Office gonna come on? When can I go home and watch The Office and Bob's Burgers and binge something? When's something new gonna come on? The newest episode of a show, blah 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 blah. Right? That is not flow. As a matter of fact, it's the opposite of flow. It's the equivalent of having a cell phone and having a bunch of background apps on. And a bunch, some people, they click their home screens and it's like, oh my God, that's a lot of programs. We're the same way. We're always just thinking about all sorts of crud, really. And what a flow state can do is close all the apps. We want to close the apps because a phone with a lot of apps open drains the battery. We become drained. We're not happy people. But when we just have that reset, when your phone has that reset, the battery lasts longer. When we have that reset, when we can close our apps, close all the things that we're worried about and stressed about and captured about, and just immerse ourselves in one thing, it's very mentally healthy. It's invigorating. And the funny thing is, gamers know this too. And usually with gamers, I find that it is, not usually, but often, I'll say often, that it's from the strategic end, like a good strategy game, right? A good strategy game that it becomes all about the mechanisms of the choices. And I've seen people play a Euro game for 4 hours. They come out of it, they haven't eaten, they haven't done anything, and it's like, whoa! And they're kind of like jazzed up. A good social game might do that. Like you're really immersed in the social interactions, and then it's like once the social game is over, it's like, oh, well, they just kind of like, wow, that was cool. It's almost like you've entered a whole nother world. That's what being in a flow state is. I find board games struggle a little bit more with story. It's a little bit of a rougher mechanism to achieve that true sense of immersion in a story, absorption in a board game. But this game, Destinies, goes further than any other story game that I've ever seen. I will say right now, without qualification, Destinies is the best story-based game ever made. For me, that I've played. And I've played a lot of them. A lot of them have come out recently. Forgotten Waters, like Robinson Crusoe's coming out with a new edition. Like a lot of story-based games, a lot of excellent ones. This one outdoes them all for me. I got into the flow. I forgot what was going on when I was going to the different places, and I've played it mostly solo. I imagine the multiplayer game would be very satisfying in that, I'm in my story and then somebody else is kind of doing a parallel story and I'm into their thing, and, worlds are happening, and I would love to have that experience. Solo was just as satisfying and just as good. Don't play the challenge mode. It's just, you talk about like something that breaks immersion, that breaks flow. You got a timer that has no reason to be there whatsoever besides some like vague sense of challenge. No. That's not challenge. That's not like natural challenge in a story game. The challenge in a real story game is paying attention. Like that, pursuing that destiny is actually pretty exciting. So you go through and it's like, okay, you can trigger that destiny, get your items, but there's still the challenge of, okay, did I do it right? Am I going to be prepared? Have I uncovered every rock? Am I going to, should I go here instead of go there? Like, there's so many little decisions that don't need a timer at all. And that point about challenge is really important because some people might out there might think of flow as a bad thing. You think of like video gamers, not all video gamers, but the types of video gamers who like play No Man's Sky or play Skyrim or something like huge game for like 18 hours, or like, they're in Overwatch meets, just kind of, churning through matches, and that they seem like they're in flow too, right? Because it's like them in the game, they're so focused on it. That's actually the negative version because what they're experiencing doesn't have challenge. It's just a shut off. Like, it's the difference between closing your background apps and just shutting your phone off. And what kind of battery health are you going to get by shutting your whole brain down, shutting your whole phone off, and just, immersing in a lower state? A genuine state of flow actually activates things, challenges you. That's why the challenge part is important. Invites you to open up stories, make links. You're always evaluating, and your brain is active when you're playing Destinies. It's not just a passive experience, which is a pit trap that a lot of story games fall into. Is too passive. This is active, challenging, immersive flow. That is what Destinies gives you. Is it a perfect game? Probably not. Is it for everybody? If you want a bigger decision space than, seeing the map and seeing the characters, or like how much dice to use on a check. Should I, do this and do that check in terms of the dice? If you want a bigger decision space than that, then this game is not for you. But if you want a low barrier of entry, immersive story experience, there is nothing better than this product right here. Clearly, I'm over the moon. Don't know what the other guys are going to rate it on the channel. However, my rating is 9 out of 10. Seal of excellence. Easy seal of excellence. This game helps you flow. It immerses you. And it is a mentally healthy experience. It isn't just like some bubblegum candy thing. Playing an immersive game actually kind of makes you feel better. I love it. Invigorates you. And I play it and it's like, all right, I'm ready for more. I actually played all 5 games in one shot, and that's a lot of energy. And I was just really excited about it. Very cool. So Destinies, highly, highly recommended. Speaking of story, my channel is called Shelf Stories. So I think I know what I'm talking about when it comes to stories. I have a channel that is all about stories, the stories that other people tell, the stories that games tell. I really believe in the healing power of story. I talk about that on my channel and many, many other things on my YouTube channel. Please go ahead and check out what I have to offer. If you could change your mind, you could change the world. So until next time, later.